Is it Russia that is isolated, or is it partly Europe today that stands isolated?
Well, you have given me a hint what I should include into my answer. Thank you for this. I assure you, it is absolutely obvious because this isolation has never taken place. The initiator of this isolation was the previous administration of the United States. Everybody is aware of this. And then European satellites followed those efforts. And currently, they're even more successful than the US administration. But initially, it didn't exist. And thanks to cooperation with some partners, including in the United States, we were not isolated. All right. Here, we have representatives of one energy company, and the previous US administration was trying to fight our LNG project. But as soon as this project began functioning, the first LNG was sent to the United States. Then uranium, yes, we are delivering uranium to the American market. And the first country, in terms of the volume, yeah, it is an American company. Then there's an international company with participation of the European and American capital. And the third one, in terms of volume, is a Russian one until now. All right, so everything is functioning.
So Americans are pragmatic, and we have to use them as an example. So whenever it benefits them, things went on. We still keep energy projects going in the Russian Far East with certain countries that formally, officially have announced their withdrawal, and yet they still remain in these projects. They keep progressing, and I'm not even talking about our friends, and not just friends. I would like to highlight that. Our reliable partners, I refer to African countries. I refer to countries of Asia, India, naturally. India, which has never followed any diktat from abroad, or the People's Republic of China, whose sovereignty and sovereign decision-making can never be contested. And as far as organizations, international ones are concerned, we have been working, and we have been working with our partners and historical neighbors, so everything keeps going, progressing. There is not much damage to us. And as you've pointed out, we see official representatives from the United States of America. I know there are representatives of Europe, and this is something we welcome. We have never isolated ourselves from anyone. And if the situation has changed in a way that we've got people from these countries, this is something we can only rejoice in, welcome.
I promised to stick to the economic questions, but being a journalist, I have to ask you this. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky wrote an open letter, and he's not just offered direct talks. In the same breath, he's also directly threatened you and has called this your war. I'd like to quote him, if I may. He says, "Our long-range drone paid a visit to your forum in St. Petersburg, covering a distance of more than 1,000 kilometers. He says this war is your personal choice, a war without a real cause. We hear you are comfortable with the war, not in those cases when it comes to security of your residence in Valdai or your parade in Moscow. Your own life is valuable to you." He adds, "You will have to fight much harder for your own existence, not Russia, but your own." He has proposed to set a clear date for a meeting between you and him. Your first reaction, sir?
Well, as for my residence or parade, this is not my personal business. Besides, they had provided some information beforehand, and they said, we knew you wouldn't be at the residence. The question is why they did that in the first place. My press secretary, the spokesperson, Mr. Peskov, showed this letter to me yesterday. We had a working lunch with the president of Uzbekistan. Truly, I didn't have a chance to look in detail. Peskov has told me about this letter once again this morning. I had a glance at it, skimmed it over. So there are several things I paid attention to. First, the author of this letter mentions my age. What can I tell? Well, everyone needs to think about their age. But I believe that at my age, many other political figures still keep performing their functions. Some of them are older than myself. Age is not the most important thing. Well, age is important, but not the most important. The most important thing is whether you are capable of functioning properly, doing your job properly. So there are my colleagues who are older and who still are very energetic. Whether they are doing the right choices or not, well, that is not for me to say. It's a political assessment. But then he said about staying in power and an elected position. This is important, no doubt about that. But you know, you've got to participate in an election. You've got to run and be courageous enough and always stick to the Constitution. Because if you cling on to power outside the constitutional field, this is qualified as usurpation of power, and that is a criminal offense. So one should not be afraid. One should run for office, and this is something I would recommend to anyone, especially because Ukraine was saying that they were going to hold elections, and then they started, they kept silent all of a sudden. The author of this letter says that the commitments achieved in Anchorage should not be observed. Moreover, he said that the search should be carried out for true guarantors of agreements between Ukraine and Russia, and they should be searched for in Europe. Well, reliable guarantors are always a welcome thing. But why would they deny the American administration this honor, and President Trump in particular? I do not quite understand. They do want to get weapons from the U.S. However, they do not want to see the administration of the U.S. or President Trump as a guarantor. And this raises questions. We saw Donald, scolding the author of the letter. He pointed out about the way he dresses. Sometimes, asking for blood is probably something you can do, but not everywhere. It's not always proper. Now, as for the manners, as it were, on the whole, I would like to thank Donald for this work. It's useful, but there are other things that still need to be done. This has to be continued. And now, on to the most important thing. The Ukrainian side has deemed it possible to give a public, open dimension to our relations. They thought it proper to put it into the public field, which I do not think right, or absolutely right. I think it's absolutely improper, but still, it gives me the right to say several things that few people are aware of, or maybe no one is aware of. And this is serious. I'm not being ironic. 3 weeks ago, a representative of our business circles gave me a call And he asked me a question. He said, Mr. President, I've known this person for quite some time. We're not close, but I trust him. He is an honest person. He said, Mr. President, I'm being invited to Kiev. I said, very well, go ahead. What am I to do with that? But I wanted to inform you because I think they're going to talk about things related to the relations between our two countries. I said, I can't send you as an envoy, as an official capacity, because only well-trained people from the Foreign Ministry, from the Defense Ministry, from Special Services have to be doing that, as it was the case during our talks in Istanbul. Unfortunately, I cannot give you any official capacity. He said, I just wanted to inform you. I would go there, listen, and then I can tell you what they are going to talk about. I can't, prohibit you, I said. And he went to Kiev, and he met there with the author of this letter, the aforementioned letter, at his residence. Not in Valdai. Then he got back. I met him. There were many things, but the essential is as follows. Mr. Zelensky has asked for a meeting. I said, I never refused to meet. But meeting, just for the sake of meeting, well, I've seen that. There's a reference to the Minsk agreements, I think. But we had been forging, hammering out those Minsk agreements throughout the night. And then the former leaders of France and Germany later stated that it had been nothing but an empty shell of an agreement. All the Minsk agreements were about one thing, that is saving more time for the rearmament of Ukraine. Why would we need anything like this once again? I said, I see no point in meeting. There's only a point for Ukraine because they want to stop the offensive of the armed forces of Russia. What we need is agreements, arrangements, not for 6 months or a year, but for the long term. First, let experts work something out, and then we can meet to sign things. But first, we need to arrive at a solution. And that is the crux of the matter. And I think the audience will understand what I'm saying, especially people from Russia. I think it was on May the 21st, whereas on May the 22nd, the Ukrainian armed forces carried out an atrocious terrorist attack against the college dormitory in the Lugansk People's Republic, killing teenagers. This is an atrocious crime. There was not a single military facility there. There was not a single military vehicle stationed next. The next morning, I gave a call to this colleague who had traveled to Kiev. I asked him, what does it mean? They are asking for a meeting, and they carry out such atrocious, blatant attacks as the killing of children. What does it mean? He said, I've got no explanation. They're calling me once again. I'm going to talk to them, and then I'll get back to you. And I'm not going to talk to them anymore. I said, very well. So this letter that you mentioned, indeed, it is rude. What is this letter about? Is it a means to create an environment for a personal meeting, or maybe is this letter meant to make sure that no personal meetings can take place at all? I think it's the second. So we shouldn't be addressing the authors of this letter. The ones to be addressed are our combatants, our soldiers at the line of contact, and I'm addressing them. And I would like to tell them, comrade soldiers and seamen and sailors, admirals, generals, officers, the country's gazes are fixed upon you. The country is proud of you and places its hopes on you. Keep working, brothers.
So I'll take that as a no. that you're not going to meet the author of the letter?
Пока не вижу смысла.
So far, I see no point.
Because you mentioned the American president, is Trump your window to once and for all settle the Russia-Ukraine question? I ask you this, President Putin, is because President Trump is maybe the only American president who's engaging Ukraine in a way to bring them to the talking table, to strike a deal. He put President Zelensky on notice. If it were Biden or Obama, this would not have been offered at all. Is he the window?
Well, I said that back in Anchorage, and I was sincere. I said back then that had Trump been president, had he not been defrauded of the election, because, you know, this vote by mail was absolutely not in line with any standards of ensuring fair elections, but he was prevented from winning. Had he been president, however, it would not have been happened. Probably he would have paid more attention to finding a peaceful solution. During the last days of President Biden's in office, I spoke to him on the phone. I called him and I said that to him. But the administration back then ignored our proposals that had been made in December 2021. Well, what can I say? Maybe if President Trump had been in power, in office, it would have turned out differently. But I treat him as a colleague, I treat him with respect. And so far as I can see, the current attitude of the administration is very much the same. We also have a personal relationship with President Trump, which is based on that respect. But certainly, key issues have to be resolved bilaterally by Russia and Ukraine, whereas our colleagues in the US and other regions of the world can create an environment and act as guarantors, and this is our assumption.
President Putin, we are sitting and discussing this at SPIEF 2026. How do you really offer a stable economic future and invite investors to Russia when we're looking at critical infrastructure being actively targeted by Ukraine?
You know, those attacks on critical infrastructure clearly do not bring any good. More than that, they do impose certain damage. However, when investors take their investment decisions, they always accumulate the whole accumulation of risks and their complexity. I had a meeting with the leading media outlets yesterday, and we were all saying that we need to contribute to strengthening of our own security, our protection. We need to build up our air defense systems, and we're determined to do so. However, big businesses always play in the long run. And most importantly, first and foremost, businesses are guided by their perception of the economy that they choose to invest into. We've been discussing what is happening in the Russian economy. And we recognize that we observe a reduction of the GDP growth. However, all of that is happening in a very conscious manner. Those are conscious steps we undertake to strengthen the foundation, the health of the Russian economy. The key macroeconomic indicators were intentionally pursuing the cooling down of the Russian economy. And I can assure you today that neither tomorrow nor in the nearest future there aren't any threats that we recognize. On the contrary, we do see that our actions bring certain results, and I know that there are many colleagues seated in this hall representing real sector of the economy. We are having regular meetings with them. We discuss all the questions, all the issues And the call that I'd like to make to the Russian audience that may be somewhat tricky for foreigners to understand, that saying, oh, it's so bad, what's happening to the key policy rate, it's difficult for investment processes. Yeah, we could say that partially that's the case, but most importantly, and that is what truly matters, the key fundamentals of the Russian economy remain solid, which gives us reason to believe that Russia remains attractive for investments, not just Russian investments, but also foreign direct investments. And we do recognize that there is interest, we see it, and certainly we are going to welcome our partners.
Okay, you're saying that, but in your speech you have set ambitious goal, launching new investment cycle, but you yourself said that there has been a decline of 2.3% last year. How do you then propose to grow in an environment of wars, sanctions, frozen assets, and while you talk about sovereignty, how do you balance that with inviting foreigners here to Russia?
Look, you were saying wars, sanctions, but the economy is still developing. It's all stable. Even the domestic market is growing in Russia, and the well-being of the Russian population is getting better. We set ourselves an objective, as I was saying it yesterday. Only by 2030, we want to reduce the poverty level down to 7%. Actually, we have achieved the level of 6.7% already now in 2026. We achieved it even sooner than expected. As I mentioned earlier, the key macroeconomic fundamentals are stable for the Russian economy. That is why, despite all the obstacles, and true, there are always many obstacles, the fundamentals of the well-being of the Russian economy remain stable and have good prospects for further development. Any business, any company is always carefully analyzing all the risks for today and for some midterm and further away future. But there are people who are willing to work and do business, of course, having analyzed all the complexity of risks, but certainly, sooner or later, we'll see those risks eliminated. As for military actions, we proceed from the perception that at some point they will be completed, and they will be completed only once the goals we have set ourselves are achieved. As for sanctions, well, I would say sanctions are much more harmful for those who impose them. Is there damage from sanctions? Yes. 300 billion were frozen, but now we have more than 500 billion in US dollar equivalent. 300 billion US dollar were frozen, now we have more than 500 billion. That's the result of sanctions. Is damage being imposed? Yes. But are the countries imposing these sanctions encountering some damage as well? Certainly. According to various valuations, from 1.5 up to 2.5 trillion euro are the losses incurred by the European zone. That's the damage from the sanctions they imposed against Russia. And right now, certain kind of revaluation is happening, certain revision, and as a result, many come to conclude that maybe it's better to get back to the path of partnership with Russia. We are going to monitor the situation very carefully, and if those partners who left Russian market 2-3 years ago haven't left too much of a bad aftertaste, we would be ready to welcome them back. And there are interested parties who are willing to come back. But certainly we would proceed and act in the interest of Russian businesses first and foremost.
We'll come back to your goals on Ukraine, but I'll have to ask you this, Madam President. Amid sanctions, you are wanting to do and increase business with Russia. How are you going to circumvent or bypass the sanctions?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. And I must say that I've been envying my panel members using their national languages, and I would like to use this opportunity to do the same. So I'll switch from English to Swahili. Yeah. Umeniuliza swala la sanction na tutafanya vipi
how we can circumvent through. I want to assure you that Tanzania is not under sanctions.
Na tunajipanga kufanya maendeleo ya nchi yetu, lakini hatuko kwenye sanction.
Okay. Coming back to the sanctions experience, President Putin, you spoke about goals. In the sanctions that we are seeing and that have been imposed on Russia, there's certainly some room for a deal to be struck with Ukraine. What is that goal that Russia wants to achieve before a deal is struck? And what are the red lines here?
You know, I guess in summer 2024, at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, I was delivering my speech and I expressed all the goals very clearly. Basically, it was at the beginning of the special military operation. I guess it would take a lot of time, but very briefly, I would answer your question in the following manner. According to the UN Charter, every country has a right to self-definition. And after the the state coup that happened in Ukraine, we saw that certain territories of Ukraine declared that they do not support and favor this coup and declared their national sovereignty. And they've done so in full accordance with the international law and the UN Charter. We've been trying to get those issues resolved by peaceful means. So we talked about the Minsk Accords. In Minsk, in the capital of Belarus, we seem to have achieved an agreement on how to find a way out of the situation in the southeast of Ukraine. But later, it turned out that the participants from the other side were only signing those papers in order to win time to rearm Ukraine and start military actions. And this is exactly how it played out. Later on, those territories declared their independence. And I'd like to remind you, in resolution of the Kosovo issue, the UN court has taken a decision according to which, so far, this territory declares itself independent, is under no obligation to request the central authorities of the country to allow them to do so. That was the decision of the UN court. And again, according to the UN court, that was the correct decision regarding Kosovo. And the same should apply to the People's Republic of Donetsk and Luhansk. Their independence has not been acknowledged for a long while. Then eventually it was recognized when it was clear that there is no way to achieve an agreement between all the parties. And it was clear that we were being deceived, and they were forced to recognize the independence of those territories. Was Russia authorized to recognize the independence of Donetsk and Luhansk? Certainly. There is no contradiction to the UN Charter. We were allowed to enter into agreement of treaty and mutual support and amity? Certainly. It was ratified by the Russian parliament. They asked us for assistance. We promised to offer assistance under this treaty, and that's exactly what we're doing. And the same letter that you referred to earlier. In this letter, they claim that we set ourselves an objective to free Donbass. Well, the two republics that I mentioned are together forming a Donbass, the People's Republic of Donetsk and Lugansk. And in this letter, it is stated that we will never achieve this goal. Well, I'm wondering, don't they know in Kyiv that starting from the 1st of April of this year, the People's Luhansk Republic is under full control of the Russian Federation and Russian troops? And the People's Republic of Donetsk is only controlled by the Ukrainian forces to less than 15% of its territories. So we are pursuing the objectives that we have set to ourselves, and there is no doubt whatsoever that those goals will be achieved. And we will achieve some other goals, but along the negotiations track, and I'm talking about denazification of Ukraine. I talked about that yesterday, and many were asking us, this is ridiculous, what are you talking about? Well, that's not ridiculous at all. Just lately, we witnessed the ceremony, the official ceremony of reburial of Nazi criminals from Ukraine. They were reburied with all the honors and fireworks. And who's doing that? The head of Kiev regime, actually Jewish by origin. This is outrageous. Only Polish reacted. Why? Because primarily Jewish, Polish, and Russians, of course, were destroying by millions during the Second World War. And we must never forget that. That is a huge part of the tragedy called Holocaust. Just think about it. Millions of children and women were killed, burned alive, and those criminals are getting their reburial ceremony with all the honors, and the head of Kiev regime is present there, saluting them, turning the Nazi criminals into heroes. And this is what we are fighting against, and we count on the support of the international community.
Shifting focus back to the topic at hand over here, let's talk about energy security. President Mirziyoyev, it is during these wars and conflicts that countries have realized the need for energy security, the need for alternative energy resources and sources, and in that, Uzbekistan and Russia have just signed an agreement for a nuclear facility. Tell us more about what this means for Uzbekistan in terms of the facility, the specialists that you would require, because this is after a long time that we're looking at a nuclear facility in Uzbekistan, and how much time will it take, how important it is to have a nuclear facility, an energy resource that is not dependent on oil.
Thank you very much. In fact, this is a strategically significant project because any country needs to ensure its energy security, and we are going to double the demand for energy in 10 years in Uzbekistan. In my presentation, I was speaking why we are addressing this issue, because the production of uranium, we are in the 5th position in the world, and the uranium reserves are in the 10th position. And together with Russia, we have been working on these projects for a long time, and we discuss, we engineer, we design, and we came across to the following. So for the first time in the history of Russia and Uzbekistan, we are going to build 2 small modular reactors and 2 larger ones. Of course, before announcing all this, we were discussing it for a long time, for many years. First, I asked to open up a branch of the MIFI University, because in order to implement something in practice, we need to train specialists. At the time of the Soviet Union, we had a very good nuclear power school, and all that was in a way forgotten or neglected, and now we had to reinstate it again. And when this branch was opened up, then science was developed, and now in this branch 300 students are getting trained, and 50 of them are graduates already. And we agreed with this Moscow MIFI University University. Now there are 400 students from Uzbekistan, and we give very important attention to training of specialists. So now we do have them. Secondly, this project has a long history, and it is a unique one because it is in compliance with all international standards. And right now, we are so close to implementation of this huge, unique project. And yesterday, together with Vladimir Putin, we launched it. In Uzbekistan, it was so late at night, but after our meeting, I spoke with the people in Uzbekistan, and everybody was so happy there, because this is important for our future. And this project is not the last one in our cooperation with Russia in the sphere of nuclear energy, and we are going to build other nuclear power plants because we have prepared the foundation for it. And as you said, specialists are extremely important for this sector. So we'll be accelerating these works, and yesterday we were discussing it with the President. Yes, we will be doing this, and we'll be supervising these works because people have been waiting for this NPP for a long time. Our economy has been growing, and we need a reliable energy supply. And yesterday we were discussing other major projects in the sphere of energy efficiency in Uzbekistan. So I believe yesterday was a historical day for Uzbekistan, and I congratulate the Russian colleagues and all the people in Uzbekistan. They were so happy, they were inspired by this, and this will be definitely an important foundation for energy security and protection of the Republic of Uzbekistan.
Partnership, they say, should be partnership of equals. President Putin, the trade ledger shows Russia exports raw energy heavily to China, but imports a lot of machinery, technology, and components. Is this relationship a partnership of equals, or is Russia sliding into a colonial trade imbalance?
Right. We are in equal partnership with our Chinese colleagues and partners. Moreover, the share of our high-tech export to China is increasing. And taking a look at the whole energy sector, machinery and equipment in this sphere, I cannot give you any specific figures, but I'm sure that it exceeds the volumes that we receive from China. And as for the energy sector, let's begin with the nuclear energy. We are building a nuclear power plant in China. How many blocks are there? 4 blocks are functioning already. So 4 blocks are functioning already, and 4 are under construction. This is blocks designed in Russia. And we also develop our partnership in science and education, and we have a very close cooperation. And this is mutually beneficial. And as for hydrocarbons, traditional energy, here we have been enriching our competences. And we were partnering with international partners, mainly they were from the United States, but now we're expanding our capabilities in these spheres. And here we have representatives of major companies of Russia, and you can discuss it with them. They will be happy to share with you their vision. Of course, China is our reliable partner, and we work with Chinese companies. We share information, data, technologies, and we are going to continue this. And I also would like to put an emphasis on the following. Cooperation with China is mutually beneficial, and we are doing it.
Okay, then let me invite Vice President Zhang. The fact that there was a recent meeting between the two heads of state of Russia and China, which drew a lot of international attention. Please throw some light on what this relationship is all about and where it's headed.
Thank you very much for your question. Yes, as President Putin described it, cooperation in the sphere of trade between Russia and China is moving forward, and this is mutually beneficial. In the past years, it has been developing in a stable fashion, and we see this solid growth, and there's healthy dynamics. And as you know, 2 weeks ago, President Putin completed a very successful visit to China. And President Xi Jinping and President Putin had negotiations in Beijing. It was on development of bilateral relations in different spheres, and in the track of trade and economic development, lots of agreements were reached. And all these results, of course, they were of a great interest for the whole world community. And all mass media were covering this. And I would like to touch upon 3 major points. As I said in my presentation, China and Russia, they are big states, we are neighboring countries, and both countries are permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations. And development of relations between Russia and China and deepening of these relations and mutually beneficial cooperation in all spheres have demonstrated that this is promoting the development and growth of both of these countries, and it also improves the well-being and wealth of both countries. At the same time, it also helps us to contribute important stability and resilience in the modern world. Secondly, I know that you give great attention to our practical cooperation, and it is not against any other third party, and it is not impacted by anything from the external. Ms. Moderator asked a question already, and you mentioned that our future development under the leadership of President Xi Jinping and President Putin, this is a strategic cooperation and partnership. It has been developing for 30 years, and this year we celebrate 25 years of the neighboring relations and friendship treaty, and we have been moving forward, and we are enriching our relations with this new substantial meaning, and this does not only improve the well-being of the populations, but it also supports the stability and peace in the region and the whole world. Thank you.
Please go ahead, sir.
You know, right after your question, I looked at the audience, and here there are presidents, leaders of our major energy companies, and, you know, I'd like to draw attention to the following. Some of our companies, yes, they were relying on the achievement of different Western companies, mainly American ones, But when this oxygen was cut off, we began developing our own engineering centers, and they are doing very well in this respect. For example, Gazprom Neft's company, I keep promising to visit their center, but I saw the information materials. There's an enormous progress that has been achieved. Of course, we are open to cooperation in the future. Yet, together with partners from different countries, we will be achieving great results. Or Novatech company, for example, they have technology only they possess. No one else in the world has it. And together with our American partners, we have been discussing if they use our technology, then production and liquefying of gas in Alaska, for example, will be much more effective than originally planned with the installation of pipeline systems. So it will be a totally different degree of effectiveness. So as for difficulties related to the sanctions in certain spheres, yes, we see that. But at the same time, it helped us to develop our own competences. The same can be said about our European partners. For example, gas branches, they keep working with them, and our partners who were developing rapidly, if now they are leaving the market, then of course they come across difficulties, and they are not happy about it. Under the blanket, they say bad words about their governments, but they had to reconcile. So they lost the Russian market, but we have increased our competences because now we have both the natural reserves and the technologies. So we see this as a very short-sighted policy for some of our partners.
Talking about technology and talking of technology, you're helping uranium when it comes to nuclear facility. What about countries like India, who actually have a lot of potential and need maybe assistance and partnership in the technology sphere when it comes to hydrocarbon and rare earth mineral harnessing of hydrocarbons in India? Is that something that you're looking at?
Yes, certainly. We are cooperating actively. Our company, Rosneft, is one of the biggest foreign investors into India's economy. How much is that, Mr. Sechin? 220 billion? How much have you paid for the oil refinery in India? 20 billion. Well, Rosneft has invested around $25 billion into the Indian economy in the form of an oil refinery, a port, gas stations, and we're certainly working closely with our Indian friends. We're working together in order to bring about positive results that we are witnessing. So we're sharing technology, among other things. And the Indian people, and we have seen that for many decades of our cooperation, starting from 1947, when diplomatic relations were established. We have had very good, trust-based, brotherly relations in all senses of the word. We know how talented the Indian people is, how well educated. Indians have their great competences, which have achieved world renown, especially in coding and in other fields, in particular what you mentioned. Yes, naturally. Right now, Prime Minister Modi has had to introduce certain restrictions. He calls not to use personal cars, not to travel long distance due to what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz. what is currently happening in the Middle East, but the Indian government has nothing to do with that. But the Indian economy is suffering. But I think our companies did the right thing, and the Indian counterparts did the right thing when they decided to embark on this path of close cooperation. Because right now we are trying to extend a helping hand and give our shoulder, increasing supplies to the Indian market and to Asia in general, and we'll certainly keep sharing our technological solutions.
You spoke of the war, so I have to ask you this. What is Russia's assessment? What's your assessment of what the global economic impact is going to be of the Iran-US war? And let's be honest, has Russia been at an advantage because of the war? Because we've got longer waivers to buy Russian oil. A lot of countries now can buy Russian oil legally without a problem because of the energy crunch that the world is facing, and President Trump has allowed, should I use the word allowed? Allowed the world to buy Russian oil.
The oil and gas profits have always been important for Russia, accounting for a significant portion of our overall GDP as well as the budget revenues. But the dependency of the Russian economy as well as the Russian budget on oil and gas revenue has decreased significantly over the recent years, not during the sanctions period, but overall during the recent period, and this has been a natural process. Right now, the share of the GDP that is not related to oil and gas was around 43%. A couple of years ago, that was 2022. So if you deduct from the overall revenue, oil and gas and non-oil and gas revenues, and see what makes what, I think it was 45% or 46% it was accounted for by oil and gas. Right now, the share of oil and gas has decreased to 23%. So there's a world of difference. As far as the revenues of the federal budget are concerned, the Ministry of Finance is here. He's going to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that oil and gas used to account. How much was that, Anton? Right now it's 20%, but how much did it used to be? It was 50% accounted for by oil and gas revenue, whereas right now oil and gas, and the minister is going to confirm that, account for as little as 20% of our federal budget. So I wouldn't go as far as to say that is of critical importance to us, so that's not as important. Even though it is still significant, 20% of the federal budget is still accounted for by oil and gas revenue. But just as for the rest of the countries, developing countries that have a rapidly developing economy, find other things more important. Of course, our oil and gas companies get certain preferences when long-term contracts are entered into, when the Russian oil price is going up. That has a positive impact on the budget. That's important, but what's more important is the market stability, because we are not only surviving on oil and gas, as I have demonstrated, we survive on the economic development in general. So if the world oil prices are too high, it has a negative impact on the part of the Russian economy that is represented by real production capacities, real industries. So what's important for us is that this price should be well balanced between the consumers and the suppliers, but most importantly, it has to be stable. The vice chairman of the Russian government will help me out if I'm wrong, but I think around 10% right now. Yes, by 10%, the oil supplies to the world market have decreased. Yes, the economy is in turbulence, the world markets are in turbulence, and this is not something we're interested in. What we're interested in is keeping our cooperation within OPEC+, with a view to stabilizing the market and decreasing its volatility. That is our priority, and this is the track we're going to pursue further.
Okay, I suppose that's the reason why Saudi Arabia is the guest country this year at SPIEF. Having said that, you also spoke about payments.
No?
It's because of that, because we're friends with Saudi Arabia, and we've been friends for many years, and we are happy to have the guests from Saudi Arabia.
This is an energy partnership that the world will actually be looking at a time when we're faced with wars and conflicts, President Sir. But you spoke about payments. You spoke about concerns regarding payments. The fact that in a jiffy, in a moment, Russia not just can be sanctioned, but its assets can be frozen. Payments under SWIFT can be blocked. And you're left with nothing. In such a scenario, one, how do you tackle it? Secondly, why should any country then consider Russia as a consistent partner?
Well, the first thing I would like to say, and I think many understand that in the US too, they understand that attempts at using USD as a weapon, as an instrument in war, well, it has brought about catastrophic consequences. It was a strategic mistake committed by the previous leadership of the United States, because US dollar is the main component of the US's economic cloud heft, and this is also a competitive advantage, not just because USD is a reserve currency, but also due to the fact that thanks to this reserve currency, the US economy has been making real money, and a lot of money too. So when the previous administration chose to start using USD, which still remains a reserve currency, as an instrument for political competition, everyone started thinking. They started thinking, we too can be the object of such actions. What is going to happen to our reserves in USD? What is going to happen with our money that has been invested in American assets? Well, certainly, the economy of the US is very big, but still it is running some problems. There's the debt, those who undermined trust in USD as the world currency. Right now, if the oil prices keep high, if the oil is expensive, it's going to affect the whole economic supply chain. And with a great deal of probability, this is going to have an effect on inflation rates in leading economies, in particular in the US economy. And inflation rate is the basic condition for the stability of USD, because it's not secured by anything. They had abandoned the gold standard in the past. What underlies the American economy is the reliability of the economy itself, the stability of the economy. And the main factor of that stability is low inflation rate. If oil prices are high, inflation is going to climb up, and this will endanger the basic premises of the American economy. These are the consequences, and we want to avoid that. We want stability in this sector, and this is something we're going to seek. So I think everyone understands what we're saying. So with Saudi Arabia, with our friends, with the Crown Prince, we are doing what we can in order to strike the balance between the interests of both suppliers and consumers. And so far, we have been successful. And we are immensely grateful to the Crown Prince and to all of our friends who are working in this field. Maybe we could give a chance to our guests to say a couple of words. That would be interesting. I understand this would be breaking the traditions of this session, the plenary.
Traditions, President, sir. Is there a mic that can go to our Honourable Minister? We'll arrange for a mic. Meanwhile, can I just take a question till the mic comes? Okay. Okay, so we're waiting for a mic for the Minister of Energy to speak and respond to President Putin. But I have taken note of the fact that every time you mention America, you're only mentioning the past administrations. I suppose Rodney's taking note as well on the specific way and the manner in which you're responding to the US-Russia equation. Having said that, every country has its own struggles. Tanzania, and Madam President over here, has been at the forefront, leading woman voice. Great to have a woman on the panel too, who's been fighting liberalization of her economy. How has that gone, and how is that moving ahead? Despite and in spite of fears of sanctions, criticism from various quarters, how are you managing economic liberalization in the country?
Asante sana, labda niseme kwamba
perhaps I should say Tanzania is a country, which is with a diversified economy. We don't depend on one commodity. The economy depends on agriculture, it depends on mining, it depends on tourism, it depends on many other sectors, manufacturing sector, we are also there. So all these sectors contribute together and they grow together at varying degrees, but they grow together. As such, we're determined to a level that we work with the international community, with the private sector from the international community, and the majority respond and they come to invest in Tanzania and to do business. And since 2021 to date, we have been able to attract a lot of capital, foreign direct investment from abroad, and this is what makes Tanzania to be safe in its own economy. But most importantly, Tanzania is strategically located as an epicenter or a hub of the economic corridor of the eastern part, southern Central Africa. And the port of Dar es Salaam, which serves all these other corridors and all other these countries. Therefore, Tanzania, being strategically located to save other landlocked countries, that by itself makes Tanzania to have a lot forms of attraction within the region. So Tanzania has a very vibrant economy, and the economy is steadily growing. We continue to grow. Since 2021, we started with 4%, and then we moved towards 4.5, 5.5, and last year we reached the 6, and we expect to head towards 6.3. But you asked me a question on to have a female president. How can you sustain your economy? Perhaps I should say that economy doesn't depend on gender, gender of the leader. It is not dependent on gender. It depends on how you steer the affairs of the nation and how you lead the country. Whether you are a male or female, it is the strategic plans that matter. That's what matters. I think I should respond that way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would it be too much to ask the minister, the honorable minister, to come and respond here? Because I think we're having a bit of a problem getting the mic. Would it be too much to ask the minister to come on the stage and respond? Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you. Oh, the mic has come, sir. The mic has come.
Вы в России находитесь.
Mr. President, magic does happen in St. Petersburg. So I'm very grateful for giving me the opportunity. I see it as an opportunity not for myself, but it's coming from a president who is a friend of both His Majesty, the custodian of the two Holy Mosques, King Salman, His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, Prime Minister Prince Mohammed. But both of them, I think, will vouch that this honor is also and more important for the people of Saudi Arabia and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So I'm very grateful for giving me the opportunity. Yes, it's a partnership that we struck somewhere in January 2015, and it withstood all of the situations that this world had endured, from COVID to all of these storms and winds and whims of the world. And even today, we're going through so many crises in many places, in different places, with different causes. Yet, we're weathering all of these storms with a diligent commitment to each other as partners, that although I am a Muslim and Russia is not Catholic, but still we do go by until death do us part. Thank you.
That's lovely.
Indeed, thank you very much, Your Excellency. But I have to draw your attention to the fact that from 10 to 15%. I'm just waiting for you to put on the headset. Your Excellency, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that from 10 to 15%, actually up to 15% of citizens of the Russian Federation are Muslims. And they don't have any other home country. Russia is their home. They proudly call Russia their home. Can I request our moderator? Well, you were saying it yourself. We also have representatives of the European Union and the USA in this room. Maybe they would be willing to raise their hands and take the microphone and say something. Why don't we do that? We keep talking about Europe and the West and the USA. Let them speak for themselves.
Rodney, will you humor us and take the mic and say a few words?
Вот там руку подняли. Да, пожалуйста.
Please.
Perfect. Please come ahead.
Куда направились-то? Вот там, вот там. Там тоже, ой, я прошу прощения.
Well, you haven't put me on the spot at all. President Putin, it's very nice to see you, and I appreciate all of the hospitality that has been afforded me on my return to St. Petersburg. I love the city, and I think you're aware of that, and I've been coming here for 30 years.
Ура! Мне тоже нравится теперь.
You have a beautiful hometown, and so do I. And I've said to a number of audiences since I've been here, there is a great kinship between Atlanta and St. Petersburg. I have come from a city that sadly was destroyed in war, burned to the ground. And St. Petersburg had resolve and fight to prevail over the Führer coming through the Admiralty Arch and proclaiming to the city that he had conquered her, and then reduce it to rubble the next day. St. Petersburg fought that off. And yesterday I was privileged to have an orchestra play for us at my request, Shostakovich's Symphony No. 7. Not only did you fight it off with resolve and grit, but you also did it with culture and music. And if only Atlanta had had Shostakovich, maybe quite possibly my beautiful city would still be as intact as this beautiful place is. I do give a good hello from your friend, President Trump, and I am encouraged by everything that has happened since I've been here, Mr. President, and I appreciate the offer to speak. And we have a lot of ideas to talk about between our two capital cities in the next week.
Can I ask you a question, Rodney?
You may ask it, but I'm not sure I'll answer it.
That's all right. Are you taking anything back to DC when you planned the ballroom?
Explain your question a little bit better. Have I learned more from St. Petersburg architecture about the ballroom?
No. Will you be inspired while creating the ballroom in Washington, D.C. at the White House?
I have already been inspired by St. Petersburg ballrooms in my lifetime and have done a lot of work in your cathedrals and your palaces. So the answer is yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for conveying greetings from Washington, D.C. And please convey my most welcoming remarks and the goal I scored back to you.
I have some very...
And thank you very much indeed for your kind words. They indeed are very well taken. Thank you for your kind words from the bottom of your heart.
I have some very tough questions to ask, but before that, we had opened the floor for our European friends here. And there, that lady over there. Can a mic go to her, please? Is there a mic? It's down there.
Ну, туда, пожалуйста.
That way, please.
Hello, Mr. President. Hello, everybody. Hello, Mr. Slutsky. My name is Diana Jovanovic-Șoșoacă, and I'm a member of European Parliament, and I'm from Romania. And I think I'm the only Romanian here. I would like to tell you that Romanian people do not hate you. Romanian people want peace with Russia. We don't want that to help Ukrainian. We don't want to give them money and arms, but unfortunately, Romania is leading from Brussels. And I cannot send you a warm hello from our president because we do not have a president. From our point of view, I'm the president of a political party, SOS Romania, which is parliamentarian and Euro-parliamentarian political party and only opposition in Romania. And Mr. President, I would like to tell you that I was senator in Romanian parliament in 2023, I think, when Zelensky wanted to talk in my Romanian parliament. And I didn't let him, and I get him out of Romanian parliament. Well, and I would like to send you from the bottom of the hearts of Romanian people and European people who thinks a lot and who have brains, that we want to cooperate with Russia. We are not enemies. You are the biggest country in the world. You are one of the biggest economy. We admire you for your force, and we admire entire Russian people. And we want to congratulate you for everything you have done and you are doing for this forum. Congratulations, and this is a lesson for European Union. I hope in a short time we won't have Ursula von der Leyen as the President of European Commission. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. You're very much welcome. Frankly speaking, I cannot, and frankly speaking, I don't want to comment on the domestic affairs of Romania, but we have our friend from Saudi Arabia, His Excellency, mentioning that Russia is largely an Orthodox country still. Well, Romania is also Orthodox. So my request is, please convey the warmest greetings and best wishes to all Orthodox people in Romania.
All this is great, President Sir, but we still have tough questions on sanctions and on waiver. It comes at a time, and I ask you, and we're going to discuss this only because of the Iran-US war, a war that has shut down one of the most critical maritime routes. Okay, please go ahead, madam. This is a major derail.
Извините. Меня зовут Karin Kneißl. Я приехала из юг.
I came from the south. 2.5 years ago, no, I was wrong in using the word south. No, I came from the west. I'm originally from Lebanon. I'm so happy for the opportunity to live and work in Russia. Thank you for this opportunity. Unfortunately, in the West, they are so convinced that I used to work for Russia 40 years ago.
My question I will ask in English, because I think there's also no German interpreter. I know that the President insists on German, but let us do it in English. Mr. President, my question is, on the modern warfare of drones, which have created such a horrible distance between, let me say, the perpetrator. I don't want to say the soldier, because it's not always a soldier. And the target. There is now a sort of technical, artificial distance, which is creating a new form of cruelty. And we don't anymore have any sort of code of honor between the parties. It was different still in World War I. How do you see this modern warfare in which the Russian army and the Ukrainian army have gained special experience? Here in St. Petersburg, about 140 years ago, Tsar Nikolai II launched a conference on disarmament. His ambassador Martin said, whenever we don't have a strict law how to do the war, let public conscience speak. May I ask you about this warfare? How can we handle it? How can it be done or be finished? Thank you.
Yes. As for these new means of war and warfare, yes, they have appeared regularly, and the international community always tries to respond to it. For example, the ban on the use of explosives and mines, but we see that many countries, they deviate from this, and we see what is supplied by the Western states to the Ukrainian troops. Even these forbidden warfare. As for these drones and UAVs, yes, this is the new reality. And mainly, of course, they are supplied to Ukraine from the Western states. In Ukraine, they are only assembled, although it seems that they try to engineer some of these drones themselves. They're not very successful in that. What can be done? As I said yesterday at the meeting with the media representatives, we need to reinforce our aircraft defense, air defense systems, and do everything possible in this respect. And unlike the Ukrainian troops, we have the whole range of technologies and resources for developing this. We have schools, we have training centers, we have a developed industry. And it is an opportunity to implement all the plans we have set for ourselves. Our industry and defense science, they are actively involved in this, and they're able to ensure this capability of the Russian troops. And this includes this new warfare. If you ask this question, I should say that the parity in the combat field, we have preferences. They are having advantages in some areas, and this is true about long-range aviation and aircraft. I would say that if certain decisions are taken in a timely fashion, and if we increase our capabilities, then it wouldn't be a serious danger, because these are aircraft that can be dealt with. But now we see that there's new type of aviation. This can be curtailed. The other party, they don't have their own production of such hypersonic, for example, weapons and missiles, the whole range of them, and some other combat warfare other countries don't have, like the mid-range weapons like Oreshnik. We spoke about it many times, but I cannot but agree with you that if there are most dangerous weapons, especially dangerous for civilians, of course the international community need to start thinking how to limit and restrict its usage, especially against civilians. This is absolutely unacceptable. This is a humanitarian crime, but this is a topic for another discussion with the experts and representatives of international organizations.
Before I go to the war question, can I just take one question from Madam President here? You said 1 out of 4 will be African. By what? By when? By 2050. And I ask you this because we ask this to everybody who boasts about population and the fact that they have a huge population. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. What do you have to offer to the world? What does Africa have to offer to the world in terms of quality?
Asante.
Thank you. We have, as the African continent, we recognize the fact that during this period, in this era, we're supposed to develop and to promote our human capital, to develop human capital.
That's very, very important.
That's critical for Africa.
And that's what we are doing. Of course, we are doing it in varying degrees in each country, but we are doing it. For example, in Tanzania, for instance, we do have right now about 500 students in the Russian Federation. They are here, learning here. And in our discussion, tumekubaliana kwamba
we have, in our discussion, agreed that we'll get more opportunity to take our children to Russia for education, because we have new areas which are being unlocked. For instance, if we speak of a digital economy or digitalization of economy, we have to learn what is it. When we speak of nuclear energy, we also need to get nuclear engineers. We need to get all the experts who can work in that field. So development of human capital, that is the direction we want to take. It is critical to our development, but secondly, especially for Africa, it is to give the opportunity to women, because currently in Africa, the doors which were closed, they are now unlocked, they're opened, especially for us who have worked through the doors. We have the responsibility to develop others.
An African girl
to make sure that an African girl has the hope for the future and understand that she is the part of the nation building. As we were told in
SDGs,
as it is explicit in the Sustainable Development Goals, that we don't have to leave anyone behind.
We are now aware that no one should be left behind. Take an example, a country growing at 80%, 6% GDP growth annually. How can it manage without involving each and everybody? So society inclusion is very, very important. And you said it right, CO2 society inclusion, but quality society.
Not only society inclusion, but everyone has to be involved.
Managing their own sustainable development. So,
as I rightly said, that by that year, one out of 4 will be an African by 2050, because African population is growing at a higher rate, and we are
to build our human capital, and we are doing it. Yesterday, when I was in Rodin University, I met Nigerians there, Tanzanians, Ghanaians, so many students from African countries. They are there studying. So this is one country, Russia, but our students have spread all over the world. So we are trying to build our human capital. and both boys and girls. So that's why I said in those years, 9 out of 20 countries that would lead the economy, 9 are coming from Africa, and I think Tanzania is one of them. Thank you.
Now I'll go back to the war question, the Iran-US war. Strait of Hormuz blockade there is a real cause of concern, worry. How is Russia looking at it? What's your assessment and reading on the global impact it is having? Apart from the fact that, yes, Russia maybe has had a bit of an advantage, what's the assessment of the blockade and the attack on Iran? Would you consider it provoked or unprovoked?
I don't see any provocations on the part of Iran. I believe at some point we agreed on the Iranian nuclear program, and everything was under control in the IAEA. But then the scenario changed completely, and this led to the tragedy we're observing now. And this is attack on Iran, and there were civilian losses, so we know it very well. And the relations between the neighboring states aggravated, and we know this very well because we have very good friendly relations with the countries of the Gulf. And I kept saying this yesterday. And in our consultations with the colleagues from Iran, we keep saying that they should deter from striking on the neighboring states. But they give a very straightforward answer. They say, we have been attacked, our children are being killed, and all the leaders of the state were killed. What can we do? We are forced to respond in such a way. So from this perspective, yeah, the situation is not very simple. We have very good relations with Iran, with the Arab countries, and we are in quite a difficult position. But we believe that the decision of President Trump to stop the combat activities is the right one. And this ceasefire will lead to a long-term peace. And I kept saying many times, Russia in 2015 played a very important role in resolving the crisis at that time. And if we can do something, we are absolutely ready to do that. If not, then we'll be just hoping that all the parties involved will manage to resolve it with peaceful means. Thank you.
Have they approached for Russia to play a role in mediating, in brokering peace? Are you in touch with just President Pezeshkian, or also have you had an opportunity to speak with the new Supreme Leader?
Well, this is not about them approaching us. You know, I think it was a year ago, or maybe somewhat later, but we reminded them of our cooperation back in 2015 when we took away the enriched uranium into the Russian territory. Back then, it led to a détente, de-escalated the tensions. We said this is once again possible, and if all the parties involved are interested in Russia playing a similar role at this point in time, we are ready to do the same. We have the requisite technology available. And originally, I would like to say, almost all the parties involved in the conflict, both Iran, Israel, and the US, said yes. They said it was interesting, this could be considered. But then they started to toughen their requirements, and this has brought about the current situation. Our proposal remains on the table. We're not insisting on anything. Should the parties involved in the conflict arrive at a conclusion that this is a good proposal, we'll be happy to help. If not, we will simply follow the situation, and as far as we can, we will try to help alleviate somewhat the tensions around this situation.
Does the offer for the uranium enrichment to be taken to Russia still stand? Are you engaged with Washington, D.C. on this? Because I suppose D.C. is very clear that they want to have the uranium, and Iran is insistent that it stays in Iran.
We're in contact both with Washington and Tehran and with Tel Aviv as well.
Because you mentioned Tel Aviv, do you think Prime Minister Netanyahu's plans, as they stand, are one of the main reasons why America is in a position where it needs to, one, look at how to get out of this, how to exit this? And do you think President Trump was misled?
Well, I have no grounds to believe that President Trump was misled, because he's a very mature person, a very experienced politician. I don't think anyone from outside can exert any significant influence on him. We know very well the concerns of Israel. They are related to their perception that Iran seeks a nuclear weapon, even though on multiple occasions before, Iran had stated, and it keeps stating, that it entertains no such plans, and we have no grounds to believe otherwise, because we have no proof that Iran seeks a nuclear weapon. But that said, Israel has these concerns, and the main problem around this situation is the lack of mutual trust between the parties. And in this particular case, it is important to place these materials under the IAEA control. IAEA is an international organization, and the leader of the IAEA was here in contact with us because the start was given to the construction of a nuclear power plant in Uzbekistan. So if it's placed under the IAEA control, I see no problem with that. As for agreeing on the level of enrichment within Iran, this is another matter entirely. I think it's less acute. I think Iran is entitled to a peaceful nuclear program, and we cooperate with Iran in peaceful nuclear energy. We build an energy unit of an NPP in Bushehr in Iran. It's operational, and we keep constructing another 2 energy units, and our experts are on the ground. Most of the personnel has been evacuated because Bushehr is almost on the coast of the Strait of Hormuz. So basically within the area of hostilities, part of the personnel, the women, the children, we have had to evacuate them, but some of the personnel still remain. And in that case, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that we're in contact with both Israelis and the Americans on this matter. They told us, yes, some things, missiles fell. Next, that was a coincidence, that was not deliberate. There are no grounds that it would be repeated, and we have no grounds not to believe them. We see Israel's concerns, and also we see there is a willingness to ensure the safety and security of the NPP in Bushehr, but it's quite otherwise in Zaporozhye, where there's the NPP and where the Ukrainian armed forces are constantly carrying out strikes next to the station in the proximity. And there was a recent strike. I think they lost their minds. They struck against the energy unit, but luckily there has been no consequences. It has been shut down, but it was not damaged. and yet the situation is very, very dangerous because there's the spent nuclear fuel, and should the vessels carrying them be damaged, a very big question begs itself where the wind is going to blow, and there's no guarantees that it's going to blow in the Russian direction. Probably it's going to blow in the European direction. So the Europeans that are condoning the actions of the Kiev regime should think about their own safety. Incidentally, quite unambiguously, unequivocally, this was mentioned by the head of the IAEA, Mr. Grossi. This is what he said. And now getting back to your question. In general, once the situation calms down, we intend to keep working with our Iranian friends and constructing these nuclear facilities. But of course, we could play a certain role here. We could assuage the Iranian concerns because they're concerned that there are restrictions being placed on their peaceful nuclear energy. But since we are working with them, we stand ready to provide them with everything they need, including the enriched uranium they need for their nuclear energy.
Beyond economic or friendship or economic partnership, President, sir, there are reports in Western media where they say that Russia has supported Iran, not just symbolically, not just in words, but in satellite images, in data sharing, in information sharing. What do you have to say to those reports?
Well, information is always on the table. Some modern control means dual use. I don't know for sure, but I think Iranians could have been getting information not just from our satellites, but also from commercial satellites. Commercial satellites sell this information on a commercial basis. It's very simple. As far as our weapons are concerned, Iran has never requested us for anything, and we have not provided them with any.
But these wars today have shown a different side of modern warfare. Drone technology, whether it's Ukraine or for that matter Iran, way ahead in drone technology, in the use of artificial intelligence. How does Russia fare, and what's your assessment on what you want to do, and reading on Ukraine's drone technology, Iran's drone technology?
Well, as far as Ukrainian armed UAVs are concerned, they have to be shot down, and we have to be more efficient about that. As for the artificial intelligence, indeed, the US and Europe are actively developing these technologies, and we're doing the same. And mostly UAVs or spare parts for UAVs come from Europe to Ukraine. Some spare parts come from the US. Whereas our UAVs are completely domestically produced.
Is AI an enabler or a disruptor?
Well, this is a new means of warfare. There's nothing strange about that, or nothing new. Everyone starts getting ready once it has already become part of real life, real warfare. But these are not the only means of carrying out warfare. The outcome is assured through a combination of forces and instruments and tools, and most importantly, thanks to the motivation, the morale of the armed forces themselves. It is also assured through internal cohesion and of the society. So these UAVs carried out a strike against a coal port. So they created some noise. There was this fire because of the coal. Did they achieve something? Yes, they did. Is that a decisive factor for achieving their goals? No, it's not. Because You need internal cohesion and union in society. You have to have your own industrial base for defense industry. You have to have your own scientific base and your own resource base. Russia has all of that. And we do that, and we will do that. So the sooner those who are fighting us understand that, the better it's going to be for them.
We're coming to the fag end, but I still have a few questions.
Yes, I'm sorry. You spoke about Iran, and we have to do them credit. Iran manages to assure internal stability within its society. This is an incontestable fact. Once the hostilities started, some in the West thought that the country would crumble from the inside, but it didn't happen. This analysis proved to be erroneous. Quite the contrary. As we can see, the Iranian society is getting increasingly consolidated. You must have seen it, you must have heard it a month ago or so. Once the conflict was launched, the first strikes were carried out. The Iranian regime, the leadership made an appeal, sacrifice your life for Iran. 5 million people volunteered, and now more than 10 million, and all of them volunteered to sacrifice their own life for the sake of their country. And this is a fact. And this is something you have to keep in mind all the time. And, well, that is what applies to the conflict in Iran.
Also, sir, dissent also has to be recognized by countries and leaders. There's dissent in Tanzania, there's dissent in Russia, there's dissent in Uzbekistan, in China, including India. How do you see dissent, and how do you engage the youth?
The more points of view exist, the better it is, because you can choose the best.
Okay, I have to ask my India question. Yesterday, you were meeting with some of the editors, and you spoke about Su-57s, and that it was an offer for a collaboration. Does that offer still stand? What are the details? And what's the conversation you're having with New Delhi?
India and we have very good long-standing relations in terms of military and technical cooperation and interaction. A significant portion of the armed forces of India are equipped with Russian equipment, with Russian material. This is a tradition that dates back to the Soviet times, and this tradition is kept alive. Our relations with the Indian friends are specific in that, thanks to our mutual trust, we concentrate not just on trade, not just on buying and selling, we're also concentrating on joint research and development. One of the most, the greatest examples is the medium-range missile BrahMos. Indian experts participated in the design of this missile from the very beginning, and Russian experts as well, and the outcome was great. India has traditionally been purchasing our aircraft, both planes and helicopters from us. Su-57 is a very good aircraft, probably the most modern one, the most up-to-date in the world as of now, and it is also the most efficient. We offered, and I said that to our Indian friends yesterday, we offered we should do that together. Well, it didn't work out, but we did it on our own, and we stand ready to sell Su-57, probably. You know, there are two pilot configurations, and it could also serve as a command center. So forging ahead, and we are very efficient, not just in aviation, but also in maritime equipment, submarines, and...
Is there a waiver or carve-out for India in acquiring and procuring Su-57s and S-500 air defense systems? from the United States of America, and will that stand? How do you think India should be dealing with America and the sanctions?
Well, I would say India always acts as a sovereign country, and under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, any potential threats of sanctions would boomerang immediately. And I know that for sure we've been in close talks with Prime Minister Modi for a long while, and he knows that for sure. We all remember a time when Prime Minister Modi was banned from going to the territory of the United States of America, and I know that Prime Minister Modi would never forget about it. Now he's a Prime Minister, all the sanctions have been eliminated, and the relationship between the USA and India are developing successfully, as I understand, and India is a sovereign country, and it is free to choose those products that they consider to be most up-to-date and most applicable for them, and obviously offering the best price-quality ratio. No matter what people say, India has always been acting in this manner. How? Well, India is always guided by its national interests. Of course, that is a very sensitive area, the defense area. But one thing is particularly important. It is crucially important. And the thing is that our cooperation with India, just like with all other partners of ours, is not subject to political environment. We can't be dictated. Do not deliver that to India. Nobody can dictate us, and nobody would even try to do that. We are always going to do what we consider to be right, and we will always stand true to commitments given to our partners, especially such partners as India. And in this spirit, according to those rules, we do our business, and this is how we're determined to continue.
I began the session by saying we can't be dictated to, and my co-moderator, President Putin, has said the same. On that note, we end the session. Thank you so much for joining us.
If I may, on behalf of all the people present in this hall, here in the panel, we would like to thank our charming moderator for this joint work and joint conversation. Thank you very much for your moderation support.